In this video, we uncover the heartbreaking story of a retired American couple whose dream of circumnavigating the globe turned into a nightmare. What began as a journey of adventure and freedom ended in a series of fatal decisions, the kind every sailor hopes to avoid. Through their tragic voyage, we'll explore the critical mistakes they made and how even experienced sailors can overlook small details that lead to devastating outcomes. This isn't just a cautionary tale. It's a powerful reminder of the unforgiving nature of the sea and the importance of preparation, awareness, and respect for maritime conditions. We'll break down what went wrong, what could have been done differently, and what every sailor, from weekend cruisers to full-time liveaboards, can learn from their story. Their experience offers lessons that might just save your life. Stay with us as we retrace their final voyage, examine the decisions that led to disaster, and reflect on how tragedy can strike when least expected. And as always, if you value real stories that teach hard truths about life at sea, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Let's begin. The Dreamcatcher rocked gently on the glassy waters of Halifax Harbor, its sleek white hull catching the first rays of dawn. John and Mary Thompson stood side by side on the deck, their hands entwined, the salt air sharp in their lungs. At 65, John's weathered face bore the lines of a man who'd spent decades solving problems, first as an engineer, now as a sailor chasing a dream. Mary, 60, her silver hair pulled into a loose braid, gazed out at the horizon with the quiet intensity of someone who'd taught children to read, but now yearned to decipher the language of the sea. Their Gibbs C-42 ketch, lovingly named Dreamcatcher, was their vessel into the unknown, a 12.6-meter promise of freedom, retrofitted, with an electric motor and solar panels that gleamed like mirrors under the Nova Scotia sky. They were no strangers to sailing, having spent years navigating the coastal waters of Maine, but this was different. This was the beginning of a circumnavigation, a journey to circle the globe to prove that retirement was not an end, but a beginning. John adjusted his cap, squinting at the rigging. The mainsail was neatly furled, the Genoa ready to catch the wind. He'd spent months poring over every inch of the boat, from the 295-kilogram Nissan Leaf battery powering the electric motor to the 6 solar panels bolted to the deck, each one a testament to their commitment to sail green. The boat's 8.5-ton displacement felt reassuringly solid beneath his feet, its 3.7 tons of cast iron ballast promising stability in the open ocean. Mary, ever the planner, had stocked the galley with provisions for 6 weeks, canned goods, dried fruits, and enough rice to feed a small army. The water tanks, all 470 liters across 3 aluminum compartments, were full. The EPIRB hung securely. In its cradle, a silent sentinel for emergencies, while the AIS transponder blinked steadily, ready to broadcast their position to any vessel in range. They were prepared, or so they thought. The harbor was alive with the sounds of departure. Gulls crying, halyards clinking against masts, the low hum of the electric motor as John tested it one last time. Mary checked the nav station, her fingers tracing the route on the chart plotter. Halifax to the Azores, a 900 nautical mile leg across the Atlantic, was their first great test. The route followed the prevailing westerlies, riding the warm, swift current of the Gulf Stream before veering southeast toward the archipelago. She'd studied the pilot charts, memorized the seasonal wind patterns, and double-checked the weather window. A high-pressure system promised fair winds for the next 10 days, a rare gift for late June. John joined her, his hand resting on her shoulder as they reviewed the plan. "We'll sail conservatively," he said, his voice steady but laced with excitement. 10-hour watches, 4 hours on, 4 off. Keep the sails balanced, and we'll be sipping coffee in Horta before you know it. They cast off at 700, the Dreamcatcher gliding out of the harbor under electric power, the Perkins diesel long since replaced. The city skyline faded into a haze as they cleared the breakwater, and Mary unfurled the Genoa, the sail snapping, taut as it caught the breeze. The boat heeled slightly, settling into a rhythm, its speed climbing to 6 knots. John stood at the helm, the Autohelm 6000 autopilot disengaged for now, savoring the feel of the wheel in his hands. The sea stretched endless before them, a deep indigo flecked with whitecaps, and for a moment they were invincible, two souls bound by love and a shared dream, chasing the horizon. Days bled into nights, the routine of the sea taking hold. Mary took the first watch, her eyes scanning the horizon for ships, her hands adjusting the sails to keep the boat on a broad reach. The Gibbsie's Ketch rig, with its 2 masts, gave them flexibility, mainsail for power, mizzen for balance and heavy. Weather? She checked the log, 120 nautical miles covered in the first 24 hours, a solid start. The solar panels hummed, feeding the batteries, their output displayed on a small screen in the cockpit. John slept below, his soft snores mingling with the creak of the hull. At night, the stars were a carpet above, the Milky Way so bright it seemed they could reach out and touch it. Mary clutched the wheel, her heart swelling with the vastness of it all, whispering to herself, "This is what we came for." By day 5, they'd settled into the rhythm of the ocean. John was meticulous about maintenance, checking the rigging daily, tightening turnbuckles, and inspecting the chain plates for signs of wear. The boat's GRP hull, built in 1990 by Gilbert Marine, was solid, but not immune to the relentless assault of saltwater. He ran his hands along the shrouds, feeling for frayed wires, and tested the electric motor's cooling system. The battery bank, a heavy addition, sat low in the bilge, shifting the boat's center of gravity. He'd calculated the stability curve himself, ensuring the extra 295 kilograms wouldn't compromise safety, but a small voice nagged at him. Had he accounted for every variable? Mary, meanwhile, was the navigator, her teacher's precision applied to the art of dead reckoning. She plotted their position twice daily using the GPS, cross-referencing with a sextant for practice. The stow log and sonar kept them aware of their speed and depth, while the Raytheon VHF crackled with occasional chatter from distant ships. She loved the Navtex, its printed weather updates a lifeline to the outside world. They were 600 miles out now, the Gulf Stream pushing them along at an extra knot. The wind held steady at 15 knots from the northwest, and the Dreamcatcher sailed smoothly, its bow slicing through gentle swells. They celebrated with a glass of wine, toasting to the adventure, to each other, to the life they'd built. But the sea is a fickle companion, and by day 8, the weather began to shift. A low-pressure system, unforecasted in their last update, was brewing to the southwest. Mary noticed it first, a subtle change in the swell, a heaviness in the air. She checked the barometer, 10-12 millibars, dropping steadily. John studied the charts, plotting a course to avoid the worst of it, but the system was moving faster than expected. By evening, the wind had freshened to 25 knots, and the seas were building 5-foot waves, slapping the hull. They reefed the mainsail, reducing its area to keep the boat stable, and dropped the mizzen entirely. The Dreamcatcher handled well, its deep keel biting into the water, but the extra weight of the batteries made her feel sluggish, less responsive than John had hoped. They were nearing Sable Island, a notorious stretch of shallow water, 180 miles, off Nova Scotia, known as the Graveyard of the Atlantic. The charts marked it clearly, sandbars and shifting shoals that had claimed countless ships. Mary adjusted their course to give it a wide berth, setting a waypoint 30 miles south. The AIS screen glowed in the cockpit, showing no vessels nearby. But the system wasn't infallible. Large ships, especially in rough seas, could appear suddenly, their radar signatures masked by wave clutter. John took the helm, his eyes scanning the horizon, the wind now howling at 30 knots. Rain began to fall, a cold, stinging drizzle that blurred their vision. Mary clipped her harness to the jackline, her movements deliberate as she checked the phone. Sails. We're okay, she called to John, her voice barely audible over the wind. Just keep her steady. The night was black, the stars swallowed by clouds, the only light the faint glow of the instruments. John engaged the autopilot, setting it to hold their course, and went below to check the bilge. The boat was taking on water. Not much, just the usual seepage through the stuffing box. But it was one more thing to monitor. He pumped it dry, his hands steady, but his mind racing. Had they missed something? The weather reports, the equipment checks, the route planning, every detail had been scrutinized. Yet the sea had a way of exposing flaws, of finding the smallest crack in your confidence. Mary stayed on deck, her eyes fixed on the AIS. A faint blip appeared 10 miles out, moving fast. A ship, likely a freighter, heading northeast. She calculated its course. CPA, closest point of approach, was 8 miles, safe enough. She radioed. Anyway, her voice calm on the VHF. Vessel at position 43.5 north, 60.2 west. This is sailing vessel Dreamcatcher. Request your intentions, over, Static answered. Then silence. She tried again, her heart quickening. No response. The blip was closer now, 7 miles, its speed 18 knots. She called John up, her voice tight. We've got a ship, not answering. John scrambled to the cockpit, his eyes darting to the AIS. The freighter was massive, a 50,000-ton behemoth, its course steady. He grabbed the binoculars, scanning the horizon, but the rain and darkness hid everything. The Dreamcatcher was making 6 knots, too slow to outrun it. He disengaged the autopilot, taking the wheel, and altered course 20 degrees to starboard, hoping to widen the gap. Mary kept calling on the VHF, her voice steady but laced with urgency. The blip was 5 miles out now, closing fast. The waves were higher, 8 feet, the boat pitching as John fought to keep her on course. The solar panels, heavy on the deck, shifted. Slightly, their mounts straining under the strain. At 3 miles, John saw it. A faint glow on the horizon, the freighter's lights cutting through the rain. It was closer than the AIS suggested, its course unchanged. He shouted to Mary, "Sound the horn!" She grabbed the air horn, blasting 5 short bursts, the international signal for danger. Still, no response. The freighter was 2 miles away, its massive bow a shadow in the storm. John turned the wheel hard, swinging the Dreamcatcher to port, trying to parallel its course. The boat heeled sharply, the battery's weight amplifying the roll. Mary clung to the rail, her harness taut, her eyes wide with fear. The collision came without warning, a grinding, bone-shaking crunch as the freighter's bow clipped the Dreamcatcher's starboard side. The hull splintered, fiberglass cracking like gunfire. John was thrown to the deck, his head striking the winch. Mary screamed, scrambling to him as the boat listed heavily, water pouring through a gash in the hull. The freighter didn't stop, its lights fading into the storm, unaware or indifferent to the devastation left behind. The Dreamcatcher was sinking, its keel no match for the flooding. John, dazed but conscious, grabbed the EPIRB, activating its distress signal. Mary yanked the life raft from its canister, her hand shaking as she tied it to the rail. They abandoned ship, the raft bobbing in the churning sea. John helped Mary aboard, her face pale, her braids soaked and unraveling. He climbed in after her, clutching the emergency bag with flares, water, and a handheld VHF. The Dreamcatcher groaned, its bow dipping below the waves, the solar panels glinting one last time before disappearing. The raft was tossed by the storm, the wind screaming, the cold biting into their bones. Mary huddled against John, her voice a whisper. "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" He held her tightly, his heart pounding, unable to answer. The hours stretched into an eternity, the raft a fragile speck in the vast Atlantic. The EPIRB's signal pulsed, but no rescue came. The storm raged on, the waves relentless, the cold sapping their strength. John fired a flare, its red arc swallowed by the night. Mary's breathing grew shallow, her body shivering uncontrollably. He wrapped her in the thermal blanket, whispering stories of their life together, their first sail, their wedding on a Maine beach, the dream that had brought them here. But the sea was merciless, and as dawn broke, gray and unforgiving, Mary's hand grew limp in his. Days later, a fishing vessel spotted the raft, adrift 50 miles from Sable Island. John and Mary were still, their hands entwined, their faces peaceful in death. The dream catcher was gone, swallowed by the deep, its promise of adventure, now a cautionary tale. The sea had claimed them, as it had so many before, a reminder of its beauty and its cruelty, its power to give life and take it away. The raft drifted aimlessly, a speck of yellow against the vast gray Atlantic, its occupants still, their dreams extinguished by the cold. The fishing vessel Northern Star, a weathered trawler out of Newfoundland, spotted it at dawn, 50 miles southwest of Sable Island. Captain Elias Morrow, a grizzled man with 30 years at sea, stood at the helm, his eyes narrowing as he trained, his binoculars on the raft. The sea was calmer now, the storm having spent its fury, leaving behind a heavy swell and a sky bruised with clouds. He barked orders to his crew, and the Northern Star slowed, its engines rumbling as it approached. The raft bobbed gently, tethered to the wreckage of a life that had ended too soon. Morrow's heart sank. He'd seen this before, the sea's grim harvest. He radioed the Canadian Coast Guard, his voice steady but heavy. "We've got a life." Raft position 43.2 north, 60.8 west. 2 persons aboard, no response. "Request assistance, over." The crew hauled the raft alongside, their hands careful, almost reverent, as they lifted John and Mary Thompson aboard. John's face was gray, his cap lost to the sea, his hand still clutching Mary's. She lay against him, her silver braid unraveled, her eyes closed as if in sleep. The thermal blanket, meant to shield them from the cold, was soaked, useless. Morrow checked for pulses, though he knew the answer. The couple was gone, their bodies chilled by the Atlantic's embrace. The raft held a few items, a handheld VHF, a bag of flares, a half-empty water bottle. The EPIRB, still blinking, had done its job, but too late. Morrow covered them with a tarp, his crew silent, the weight of the moment settling over the deck like fog. The Coast Guard arrived within hours, a helicopter's rotor wash churning the sea as a cutter pulled alongside. The Thompsons' bodies were transferred along with the raft for transport to Halifax. The Northern Star resumed its course, but the mood aboard was somber. Morrow sat in the wheelhouse, staring at the horizon, wondering what had gone wrong. He'd heard of the Thompsons. Word of their eco-friendly circumnavigation had spread among the maritime community. Their dream catcher, a symbol of ambition and ingenuity. But the sea cared little for ambition, and Sable Island, that treacherous crescent of sand, was unforgiving. In Halifax, the news spread quickly, a quiet ripple through the sailing community. The Thompsons' story, once a beacon of adventure, became a cautionary tale. At the marina where Dreamcatcher had been moored, sailors gathered, their voices low as they speculated. Had the electric motor failed? Were the solar panels too heavy? Did they misjudge the weather? The Coast Guard launched an investigation, piecing together the final days of John and Mary Thompson. Their findings a mosaic of technical data, human error, and the sea's relentless unpredictability. The Dreamcatcher was never found, its fiberglass hull likely shattered and sunk, claimed by the depths, but the raft provided clues. The EPIRB had transmitted for 36 hours, its signal picked up by satellites, but delayed by the storm's interference. The handheld VHF showed no outgoing calls beyond Mary's attempts to contact the freighter. The flares, half used, suggested desperation in their final hours. The Coast Guard's report, released weeks later, pointed to a collision as the likely cause. AIS data from nearby vessels identified a Panamanian registered freighter, the Global Titan, which had passed through. the area at the time of the incident. The freighter's crew reported no knowledge of a collision, their radar cluttered by the storm's waves. The Dreamcatcher's small size and low radar profile, combined with the heavy weather, likely made it invisible until it was too late. Investigators focused on the Dreamcatcher's modifications. The Gibbs C-42, a sturdy vessel built for blue water cruising, was designed for a diesel engine, not the 295-kilogram Nissan Leaf battery and electric motor John had installed. The 6 solar panels, weighing an estimated 120 kilograms, were mounted high on the deck, raising the boat's center of gravity. Stability calculations recovered from John's laptop at their main home showed he'd accounted for the added weight, but only in calm conditions. In the 8-foot seas and 30-knot winds of the storm, the extra mass amplified the boat's roll, making it harder to maneuver. The collision, likely a glancing blow from the freighter's bow, had torn a 3-foot gash in the hull, flooding the boat in minutes. The Thompson's preparation was meticulous, but not flawless. Mary's navigation logs, found in a waterproof notebook in the raft, showed precise plotting up to the day of the storm. She'd adjusted their course to avoid Sable Island shoals, setting a waypoint 30 miles south, a prudent decision. But the low-pressure system missed in their last Arswamli. Navtec's update had caught them off guard. The barometers dropped from 1012 to 998 millibars signaled trouble, but they'd been too far from land to seek shelter. Their decision to reef the mainsail and drop the mizzen was textbook, reducing sail area to maintain control. But the boat's sluggish response suggested the battery's weight had altered its handling. John's engineering background had driven the Dreamcatcher's eco-friendly design, but it also bred overconfidence. The electric motor, powered by the battery and solar panels, was efficient in calm waters, delivering 50 horsepower equivalent, with 0 emissions. But its cooling system, untested in prolonged heavy weather, may have overheated, reducing power when they needed it most. The solar panels, while innovative, added windage and weight, making the boat less responsive in the storm's gusts. The Autohelm 6000 autopilot, reliable in fair conditions, struggled to hold course in the steep waves, forcing John to steer manually, exhausting him as the freighter approached. Mary's navigation skills were equally impressive, her sextant readings accurate to within a mile, a rarity in the GPS era. She'd cross-referenced their position with the stow log and sonar, ensuring they stayed clear of shallows. But the AIS, their lifeline to avoid collisions, had limitations. In heavy seas, wave clutter could mask smaller vessels, and the freighter's crew, focused on their own battle with the storm, may not have seen the Dreamcatcher's signal. Mary's unanswered VHF calls, logged at RO200 and RO215, suggested she'd followed protocol, but the freighter's silence sealed their fate. The investigation also examined their survival strategy. The life raft, a 4-person model with a canopy and ballast pockets, was properly deployed, its tether cut cleanly, indicating a controlled abandonment. The EPIRB, a McMurdo smart find, had transmitted their position, but the storm delayed rescue efforts. The raft's emergency kit included water, flares, and a thermal blanket, but the 10 degrees Celsius water and 30-knot winds induced hypothermia within hours. John and Mary, dressed in foul weather gear, lacked immersion suits, a critical oversight for Atlantic crossings. Their bodies, found intertwined, suggested they'd clung to each other until the end, a final act of love in the face of despair. The sailing community grappled with the tragedy, dissecting the Thompsons' choices. At a memorial in Halifax, friends and fellow sailors shared stories of their passion, their meticulous planning, their dream of a sustainable circumnavigation. John's brother, Tom, spoke of his relentless curiosity, how he'd spent months retrofitting the Dreamcatcher, testing the electric motor in Penobscot Bay. Mary's sister, Ellen, recalled her love of teaching, how she'd brought that same patience to learning navigation, her sextant a gift from John on their 30th anniversary. The marina's bulletin board became a shrine, covered in photos of the couple, smiling on the Dreamcatcher's deck, raising glasses at a yacht club dinner, plotting routes over coffee-stained charts. The broader maritime world took notice, too. Blogs and forums buzzed with analysis, some praising the Thompsons' eco-friendly vision, others questioning their readiness for the Atlantic. A post on a popular sailing site read, "They did everything right, but the sea doesn't care. One bad decision, one missed signal, and it's over." Another argued the battery and solar panels were a gamble, trading stability for sustainability. A veteran circumnavigator wrote, "The Atlantic is no place for experiments. Stick to what's proven." Yet others defended their ambition, noting that every sailor pushes boundaries, that progress comes with risk. The Coast Guard's report offered lessons, not blame. It recommended immersion suits for cold water passages, regular AIS testing in heavy weather, and conservative weather routing. It urged sailors to prioritize stability over innovation, especially for long passages. The Dreamcatcher's modifications, while visionary, had tipped the balance, making her vulnerable in conditions she was built to withstand. The report also called for better communication protocols with commercial vessels, citing the Global Titan's failure to respond as a contributing factor. For those who knew John and Mary, the technical details were secondary. Their loss was a wound, a reminder of the sea's dual nature, its beauty and its brutality. The couple had sailed into the unknown, driven by a dream that outshone their fear. Their route, Halifax to the Azores, was the first leg of a planned circumnavigation through the Caribbean, the Panama Canal, across the Pacific to Polynesia, and beyond. They'd spoken of it with childlike excitement, their charts marked with destinations, Horta, Antigua, Tahiti. They'd prepared for years, taking courses, upgrading their boat, practicing man-overboard drills. But preparation, no matter how thorough, couldn't account for the sea's caprice. In the weeks that followed, the sailing community rallied to honor them. A regatta was held off Halifax with boats flying green pennants in tribute to their eco-friendly vision. Funds were raised for a maritime safety program, teaching cold water survival and collision avoidance. Their story became a case study in yachting magazines, a poignant reminder to respect the ocean's power. Yet it was the small moments that lingered, their laughter over a botched docking in Maine, Mary's habit of singing to the stars on night watches, John's quiet pride in his engineering fixes. The Dreamcatcher's wreckage was never recovered, but its legacy endured. Divers searched the waters off Sable Island, finding only a few fragments, fiberglass shards, a piece of the Genoa sail. The Atlantic had claimed her, as it had so many before. For John and Mary, the sea was both their dream and their undoing, a vast, indifferent force that gave them freedom and then took it away. Their raft, now stored in a Coast Guard warehouse, was a silent witness to their final hours, a testament to their courage and their love. As winter settled over Halifax, the marina grew quiet, the boats tucked away until spring. But the Thompsons' story lived on, whispered in yacht clubs and written in the waves. They'd set out to circle the globe, to prove that age and retirement were no barriers to adventure. They'd sailed with skill, with heart, with a vision for a greener future. But the sea, as it always does, had the final word, leaving behind. A lesson as old as sailing itself: respect the ocean, for it respects no one.